Welcome to Break the Rules with Dr. Lauren Lax, a podcast dedicated to quieting the noise in the health, food, and fitness world. Dr. Lauren is a leading nutritionist, therapist, and functional medicine practitioner on a mission to help others thrive in their own lives, mind, body, and soul. And now, your host, Dr. Lauren Lax.
Well, hello. Welcome to another edition of the Break the Rules podcast, where we talk about quieting the noise in the health, food, and fitness world. And today I'm super stoked to have Dr. Heather Paulson in the house, and she is a board-certified naturopathic oncologist, teacher, best-selling author, and speaker. And this is an interview I've been looking at for a while, some time. Today we're talking about vegetarian/vegan, gone animal-based, again, protein, the differences in the different diets out there that tend to be very overwhelming to know what is quote-unquote right, what you should be doing. And I think what you'll learn from today is that there's no one-size-fits-all approach, as tends to be the theme of this podcast, and kind of learn just a very unbiased perspective on someone that's kind of walked the walk on both sides of the coin as well. And that is also a practitioner working with patients to help find what works best for their body as well. So, Dr. Heather, thanks for coming on. And if you could just give us a little bit of background about who you are and the work you're doing in the world, as well as a little bit of your story.
Absolutely. Well, I just want to thank you for having me on your podcast and talking to such a great group of people who are listening today. I started down this road of naturopathic oncology as a marine biologist. And people often ask me how I went from marine biology to a naturopathic oncologist. And it was really because of my own experience of watching my dad go through cancer treatment, and what I hope nobody ever experiences from cancer ever again. So I was driven by all of the questions our family didn't have answered, like, should we change our diet? What kind of diet should he be eating? Are there supplements that could help? Is there something else we could be doing to prevent his cancer from coming back? Are these natural therapies real, or are they snake oil? These are all the questions that my family had when my dad was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. And I felt like I couldn't find the exact answers to those questions. I was a marine biologist, trained in research, and as a marine biologist, you do a lot of the same pre-med classes as everyone going on to medical school. And it was when I was working in the National Park Service in a redwood forest, which was so beautiful, that my dad actually died of his colon cancer. And I was standing in the forest thinking about what causes cancer, all the questions that our family never had answered, and how we can change the terrain of a redwood forest to be healthier and support the river and the river ecology. And we were trying to bring back coho salmon to a part of Northern California, and we were successful at doing that. And if we can remove obstacles to a healthy river system, like the wrong plants growing in the wrong place, or we had to change the way that the river was flowing through the park. We had to make it less pretty and more naturally flowing. If we could do that in a forest, why couldn't we do that in the human body? If we could remove non-native plants and prevent them from growing back by changing the soil pH and planting the right things, why couldn't we do that with cancer cells? Why couldn't we remove cancer cells with surgery and chemo and radiation, and then change the soil of the body to prevent cancer from coming back? Because with my dad, he was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer when I was about 18, 19 years old, and his cancer would go away and come back and go away and come back. And it always kind of baffled me that we had these periods of no cancer growth. And how can we lengthen the time in between remission and cancer coming back? And I really was struck by the beauty of the redwood forest, the wisdom of nature, and how we could learn how to change our environment for better health.
That is so powerful. And I can imagine your dad is just so proud of you with that. And so thank you for sharing that. So with that epiphany that you had, what did that look like then? Was it like, I'm like diving into going into cancer specialty full on? I'm going to figure out what the body needs. Did you know what the body needed for tilling that soil? Like, I'm sure you were learning and had learned a lot through his journey walking alongside of him.
Yeah, so I just dove straight into naturopathic medicine. I found out about naturopathic medical school literally 3 days before my dad died. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so many things we were looking for as a family. We were asking, should he change his diet? And his oncologists were like, no, diet doesn't really matter. And here are a group of doctors who are trained in nutrition. And we said, are there supplements that we could add? No, you don't need to add supplements. And then there was this group of doctors that was trained in reading the research studies on nutrients and applying them therapeutically. And we asked things like, is there anything else we should be doing? And there's this, group of doctors who know what else you could be doing. And there were other parts of the cancer journey. And I think in a lot of different sectors of healthcare where people don't feel like they're treated as a whole person. So one of the principles of naturopathic medicine that drew me in was treat the whole person. And then doctor as teacher. A lot of times we don't understand the disease process. And with my dad's cancer, he wasn't told that he had stage 4 cancer. And it really would have changed, I think, some of his choices if he had known earlier on what stage cancer he had, what his prognosis was. And I think this is a really important piece of just having open and honest communication with the healer and people who are on the healing journey. And it's all of those pieces. I just saw it. And within 6 months of coming across the term naturopathic doctor, I had finished my job, my contract with the National Park Service, and was moving to Seattle to go to Bastyr. I didn't end up staying in Seattle because I am not like a Pacific Northwest rainy person. I grew up in Southern California. I was like, can we just take all of the coffee and all of the wonderful food and just like bring it down a couple latitude points so I could have some sunshine? That'd be amazing. So I ended up going to Arizona to Southwest College of Naturopathic Medicine. But that is the type of person I am. I just, see the gap and where people could have healing and where I could have healing in my own life, and jumped straight in.
Yeah, the only way in is through. So, well, today we're talking, about the hot topic of vegetarian diets, vegan diets, or plant-based. And sometimes, people would say versus an animal-based diet. And I think from your experience, what we were talking about before, sometimes it doesn't have to be an either or, that there can be a bridge in the middle or different seasons. But kind of let's dive right into that and give us a little bit of background about your dietary experiences and kind of like now as a naturopathic physician, kind of what you've learned as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So like many of my patients, I watched a documentary and was like, oh my gosh, I need to do this. I need to change my diet. I watched the documentary Forks Over Knives. And then there was another documentary that I watched that was about some other farming practices. And I was so struck by the information about reversing cardiovascular disease and cancer and so many different things that we actually, in my clinic, I took a group of patients to watch Forks Over Knives together. And then we started a 30-day vegan challenge. And for me, that challenge then continued for several more years. And I was vegan for several years. Unbeknownst to me, I have been diagnosed with an underlying bleeding and clotting disorder, an autoimmune condition to clots. And I started just having hemorrhaging to the point where my hematologist wanted to admit me to the hospital for blood transfusions and overnight stays. And at that point, some of my friends and colleagues intervened and were like, hey, I think you need to add meat back. Like, maybe you should add meat back. And even at that point, I was like, oh, I don't want to add meat back, because if you go vegetarian or vegan for a period of time, the smell of meat really starts turning your stomach, and you don't produce the same kind of enzyme. So it kind of sits there and doesn't feel great. But I started looking at some of the research on anemia and blood building, and found that even adding 1 ounce of meat to a cup of beans can improve iron saturation rates significantly and help people who were malnourished with anemia bring their iron stores back up within 4 to 8 weeks. So I was like, all right, I can at least do an ounce of meat, because an ounce of meat is like a tablespoon to 2 tablespoons. So I just started there and then started adding some more. And over time, with some iron infusions and some other health interventions, I was traditional Chinese medicine, acupuncture, homeopathy, the right supplements, I was able to build my blood stores back up. I was able to start breathing again. I mean, like, my blood counts were so low, I couldn't take 3 steps without wheezing, because I had no oxygen circulating in my body. And then from there, I ate meat intensely for 2 years until my ferritin, the storage form of iron, got to a good place, and my hemoglobin and hematocrit and red blood cell count were normal for 6 months. And then from there, I started working my way back towards being vegetarian, because there are so many benefits to eating a more plant-based diet, which does not necessarily mean no animal protein. It just means more fruits and vegetables and beans. There's a lot of benefits to that. And there are more than just nutritional reasons that people eat plant-based. There's a lot of spiritual practices that look at eating plant-based diets, eating vegetarian diets. And so it's from both a nutritional perspective and spiritual perspective that I choose to limit my animal proteins, but also recognize that there's a balance there. And so I was, again, vegetarian, no meat so I ate I was vegan for 2 years, then ate tons of meat for 2 years to bring my iron stores up, then kind of flexitarian, and then went back to being vegetarian for a year. And after being vegetarian for this past year, I just ran my blood work again, and my iron stores are low, and my hemoglobin and hematocrit are at a place where my hematologist would not be excited and would start doing transfusions if I would let her. And I'm like, okay, time to add the meat back in. And I think I'm just going to have to figure out the balance for my body of how much is enough and how much is too much.
Yeah. And it's really cool. I mean, with your background, that you can kind of know how to figure that out. I think a lot of folks just they're not looking at the blood work for their body, or really even correlating symptoms a lot of times to how they're feeling. But I want to kind of backtrack to your vegan days, plant-based days before introducing protein in. How long were you on that diet? And I mean, was it a true plant-based, were you actually eating vegetables, or was it more like Annie's mac and cheese, but vegan, like the style of vegan?
Yeah, I was doing a very conscientious vegan diet. So I wasn't doing a junk food vegan diet. I was already a naturopathic doctor at that time. I've already taken tons of training in nutrition. I'd already been practicing naturopathic oncology for several years at that point. So I have a lot of background and training in nutrition and diet. And so I was very conscientious about making sure that I was getting complete amino acid profiles in my vegan diet, balancing beans with things like rice, and to get that full vegan amino acid profile. I was taking my B12 supplements. I was doing the things that you would need to do to supplement your deficiencies if you were to do a vegan diet unconsciously, because there's a lot of risks of nutrient deficiencies and amino acid deficiencies with a vegan diet.
Yeah, let's kind of talk a little bit about that. And then we're also going to explore protein as well. This is not just a doc on any one diet, really. It's just to really know lay of the land from a health perspective, What are some of the deficiencies folks can run in? And what are just some of the common, like unbeknownst to them, roadblocks that you see folks run into as well?
Yeah. So some of the deficiencies that are very commonly known in a vegan diet are B12 and iron. Iron is one of the deficiencies I ran into as an issue. And B12 is very commonly low on a vegan diet because B12 is more concentrated in animal tissues and eggs, and it's not really found in any plant-based sources except for live active yeast. Now, there are some downsides to eating yeast, right? Because some people can be sensitive to yeast and have mold issues or candida issues. So if you are only getting B12 from yeast, then it can set off some other downsides for people. So if you're doing a vegan diet, if you're choosing a vegan diet, we always monitor your B12 levels in blood work and make sure you have enough B12 and supplement as needed.
Yeah. And what about so something as a nutritionist, I find, and this isn't just on vegetarian, vegan diets, it's also just paleo, keto, carnivore diets. There's not a lot of color. It's like I can see a lot of folks just missing out on, I think the average statistics, 1 in 10 Americans eat at least 3 vegetables a day. And the top vegetables would be potatoes and tomatoes. What have you seen in practice of your patients?
Yeah, so I think that when people are eating a well-balanced vegan diet, it's very challenging to not eat a lot of vegetables, right? And you can get stuck in not eating a lot of color, but actually, if you're eating a healthy kind of vegetarian or vegan diet, you're eating berries, you're eating fruits that are red and blue in color, you're eating leafy greens, you're eating broccoli for iron and calcium, you're having whole grains so that you're getting more of the folate and B vitamins. So you're getting a variety of color if you're doing it consciously, right? But like any other diet, you can do a keto diet more consciously and have more color in it too, right? I mean, I think I could eat I've done a keto diet. So I've done all the diets. So one of my teachers in school said, never recommend something to a patient that you've never done yourself. So I also did a straight keto, testing my ketones and my urine and everything for 60 or 90 days and didn't have great results from that either. I started having severe depression, coming into the office crying, asking one of my friends to prescribe me antidepressants. And she was like, maybe you should go home and have a serving of rice and then let me know tomorrow if you still need antidepressants, because whole grains can help with serotonin production and can help balance out blood sugar irregularities. So I go into ketosis really easily. And I was just I could drink a glass of wine and eat carbs and still be in ketosis. So yeah, which people would envy, but it meant being on a strict keto diet wasn't really great. But I remember from that I could eat 10 strawberries on a keto diet to get some of those reds in and a handful of spinach. And so you could still do colors. So I've tested, I'm like a human laboratory. I've tested all of the things.
Yeah. And kind of coming back to balance too. Sounds like in the middle. So on the flip side, for folks that are on an omnivorous diet, we talked about B12 deficiency and iron in vegan, vegetarian type diets. Are there any deficiencies you see as a naturopathic physician from an omnivorous diet?
Yeah, on an omnivorous diet and going from omnivorous all the way to keto, there can be a deficiency in fiber is one of the main deficiencies I see. And in cancer care, getting enough fiber is so important. There's clear studies that document that eating 30 grams to 40 grams of fiber per day reduces the risk of colon cancer, reduces risk of recurrence from colon cancer, reduces breast cancer risk, reduces prostate cancer risk. So if you were trying to get 30 grams of fiber and you weren't eating beans, let's say you had eggs and toast for breakfast, a piece of toast is 4 grams of fiber. If let's say you had a salad for lunch, if it's several cups of lettuce, we did this experiment with my students at Southwest College of Naturopathic Medicine. I had them like tally up their fiber per day, and even eating a big salad and then eating chicken and vegetables for dinner, you would get probably about 20 grams of fiber probably. So that is the main deficiency I see in an omnivorous diet.
Cool. So yeah, it's just, again, back to balance. I'll keep saying it throughout this. Let's talk a little bit about gut health in both diets. And so something that I find a lot of my practice, and I do see a lot of individuals for gut issues, but that like vegetables and fiber can make them feel more bloated, or maybe if they do have some candida, SIBO, and they're like, oh, I need to do an anti-candida diet. And so that can make getting vegetables in challenging. Is that something you ever ran into on a plant-based diet? Is gut imbalances, or did your gut adapt?
Well, so what's interesting is that different people can have different experiences in their gut microbiota based on what their diet is. And I think that's a really important piece of this. There is no one size fits all, because some people need a lot more fiber to balance out their gut microbiota, and some people need a lot more essential fatty acids. And I do see changes for different patients. Some patients will have gas and bloating on a vegan diet and have some disruption to their gut microbiota, and other people will have diarrhea on a keto diet, right? So it's so individual. And what it really for me, it comes back down to a couple things. Fiber is known from this is from my cancer perspective. Fiber is known to help establish good gut microflora or resistant starches. So however, there are resistant starches like green bananas and resistant starch powder that you can add to smoothies or add to your diet if you're on a keto diet. That doesn't shift ketosis. And there is also ways to help with that gut microflora. It's pretty easy on a vegetarian diet to make sure you're getting the right short chain fatty acids and the right fiber to help the gut microflora. But as some people go on a plant-based diet that is also oil restricted, and then they're not getting the short chain fatty acids that they need.
And tell our listeners what short chain fatty acids are and where they would get that.
So short chain fatty acids are fatty acids that have a short chain in organic chemistry. Like that doesn't really mean a lot to anyone who hasn't taken intense nutrition classes or hasn't taken organic chemistry. So we won't go into like the chemistry nerdery of that. But basically short chain fatty acids are produced in the gut when we eat certain types of fat, like butter and ghee are really good sources of short chain fatty acids. And then also when gut microbiota start breaking down fiber in our gut, they help make short chain fatty acids in the gut. And it's just used to help heal the gut. Short chain fatty acids are used in certain biochemical reactions in our body. And if you're low in short chain fatty acids, you'll get dry skin or brittle hair or some gut issues too.
Yeah. So making sure like the vegetarian or plant-based diet does have some of those included. Just from a healthy fat perspective in the diet as well, can be a reason for gut issues to be common, and nutrient malabsorption as well. Just fats help us absorb our nutrients. Let's talk a little bit about like the cancer meat connection. I know you are a specialist in cancer. And so what do you find to be like the dogmas? What do you find to be the truths? I mean, you said Forks Over Knives is the movie that you saw. There was another plant-based movie, what was that one called?
There was one called What the Health.
Yes.
That really got people interested in going vegan again. It's Forks Over Knives. Some of the interviews and docuseries on like the Gerson diet or different cancer specific diets really get people interested. And then Chris' work is awesome. He is known as Chris Beat Cancer, and he has a book called Chris Beat Cancer, and he is a huge proponent of a vegan diet. And so there's different people in the cancer realm that really support a plant-based vegan diet, specifically a vegan diet. What I find interesting about meat and cancer is that really when we take a step back and look at large-scale, long-term epidemiological studies, there's a couple things that pop out to us in terms of what increases cancer risk. And one of the main things that increases risk of onset of cancer and risk of cancer coming back or risk of recurrence is eating a diet that's high in saturated fats. And where we get saturated fats from is usually meat. There's not saturated fats in plants. So there's this extrapolation where we're trying to say, oh, okay, since a diet high in saturated fats creates more cancer and increases your risk of cancer, therefore we must swing to the other direction and eliminate all meat. And it's interesting that that's not really what the studies say. The studies say that as long as you have less than 30% of your diet, 30% of your calories of your diet being saturated fats, then it doesn't really increase risk of cancer. So generally that is equivalent to about 4 to 6 eggs a week, plus 4 to 16 ounces of red meat, plus like salmon or fish is not high in saturated fat. So you could eat fish and still be low in the saturated fat category.
Is it too, like, it's more so, it's not sometimes I guess it could be the food itself, but it's more like what is your bacteria able to digest and absorb? And then that's really what can cause that inflammation from an immune perspective as well. An immune cascade for the cancer, like teeing you up basically. It's the compound effect basically.
Yeah, well, we're looking at a couple of different things about cancer and nutrition. It's, what kind of fats are you eating, saturated or unsaturated fats? What kind of blood sugar management is your body able to handle? Some people cannot do a lot of fruits or a smoothie with a fruit-based smoothie without throwing their blood sugar out of whack, and other people can. So how is your sugar? How are your fat intake? And then what are your inflammatory markers? And if your inflammatory markers are high and they go down on a keto diet, then that might be a good fit for you, or it might be a good fit for you for a period of time until you can modify it. If your inflammatory markers are high and you go on a vegetarian or vegan diet and they come down, which has been shown to be able to be done in research studies over and over again, then that might be a good fit for you. It might be a long-term fit or a short-term fit. It's really about tuning into your body, working with someone that monitors your lab work too, I think is really important, and knows how to correlate that information and that feedback to what's going on. And then we're not even like going down the rabbit hole of Chinese medicine or Ayurvedic medicine. And there is real concerns about certain types of people, certain types of doshas in Ayurvedic medicine not eating meat, and certain organ deficiencies or meridian irregularities that you're trying to correct, and eating raw food can sometimes throw that off, or not eating meat can sometimes throw that off, or eating too much fat can throw that off. So there's so many different ways for us to look at this question of what should I be eating? And I think it gets complicated, and we are guilty, like you and I having this conversation are guilty of making it more complicated too, because someone's probably listening to this being like, well, now I'm more confused.
Right. It is a dance of intuitiveness, I think, of just learning. And I mean, we've definitely dove into the studies and the understandings over time, and it's still an evolution. Like you said, like sometimes you'll be more plant-based, sometimes you'll add a little bit more protein, but you've learned over time from experience to do that. And so I guess to reassure the listeners as well, it's just intuitiveness is a dance, and it's ongoing, and it's not a black and white, diet book you're going to get, that's what you should eat, or a stamp in time. Like you should always be vegetarian, vegan, paleo, keto, whatever it is. And this brings to mind a patient of mine. She recently was on a carnivore diet because she was told that like, that's what she needed to do to like lose weight. She had tried everything else. And basically her cholesterol markers went up to 600 is what we saw. I've never seen anything that.
Oh my gosh.
But she was feeling good. She said she didn't feel that inflamed. What we ended up finding out is she had a lot of gut stuff going on. She had SIBO, candida, and just years of dysbiosis. I think driving more of the gut symptoms with like eating vegetables, that was making it really hard to have that diet. And so when we worked together to address those things, it wasn't so much like she had to be fixed in a diet. It was more like coming back to balance with her diet and making peace with the food and not just having to like, I don't know, fit into a square peg into a round hole, I guess.
Yeah. And I think being in balance with food comes from many different levels, right? There's the emotional balance with food and there's physical balance with food. And when I work with people, a lot of times they come in afraid that what they're eating is going to kill them. Like that's a legit sentence that people will say. I'm afraid that if I eat this piece of fruit, it's going to kill me because it's going to make my cancer grow. And fruit's high in sugar, so I shouldn't be eating fruit. And it's like, well, actually, if we dial back and look at the cancer research, women who ate dried fruit and had a history of breast cancer, they were less likely to have recurrence when they ate dried fruit and other fruit in their diet. And then when we look at research, I always wondered, why do they say fruit and vegetables? You know, we hear these recommendations of, 7 to 12 servings of fruits and vegetables. Well, because in the research, they don't distinguish between fruit intake and vegetable intake for large, long time studies. They're just saying, okay, how many times a day did you eat your fruits and vegetables? And so we don't actually know the risk of, well, what if I remove fruit and just eat vegetables? That's not been studied except for adding fruit back in and eating dried fruit and reducing risk of recurrence. So it helps to, one, know your own body, to work with somebody like me or someone in your local community that's nerding out on this information and like doing deep dives and trying to figure out the nuances of all of this. And then 3, just eat a balanced diet. Don't villainize any one food, because what I tell my patients is if you are craving something and you generally eat a clean diet, and actually why I reran my blood work is because I started craving meat. And I was like, well, that's weird. I wonder where my iron stores are at. I wonder where my hemoglobin and hematocrit's at, because I haven't craved meat in 2 years. And so when you eat a clean diet and you have a craving, I tell my patients it's important not to judge that craving and to look at it with curiosity and see what kind of feedback your body is giving you. Mm-hmm. And for me, it was giving me feedback that I needed more iron. And it's just like, it's the innate wisdom of our body is amazing as long as you're eating a clean diet. Now, if you're eating addictive foods, high sugar, high fat, fast foods, then you have a craving for a food, you're having an addictive craving, you're having a withdrawal symptom. So we can't really trust the feedback of our body when we're eating addictive substances. But if we're eating non-addictive substances and our body says, hey, I am craving this, then we can honor that.
Very well said. And when given the right tools, the body innately wants to heal. The body wants to innately work for you, not against you. And Dr. Heather, thank you for just helping us really break some rules there and that frame, and just coming back to having peace with food and using it therapeutically as needed as well throughout our lives. So thank you so much. Where can people find out more about you and the amazing work that you're doing in the world?
Yeah, so you can connect with me at my website, drheatherpaulson.com. That's DR, and then my name, Heather Paulson, PAULSON.com. And that's a great place to connect. And I'm also on Instagram and Facebook at drheatherpaulson.com. But the best way to connect with me is really my website. And we do have a cancer-proof diet roadmap where we've where I've boiled down the last 20 years of nutrition and cancer information into a one-page handout that you can take with you to the store that ranks foods from cancer-proof to not cancer-proof. And it's a pescatarian diet. So it includes some fish, it includes some eggs, but you don't have to eat fish and eggs if you're feeling good on a vegetarian diet. And then you can add red meat if your blood counts are low from chemo or something else is going on. So yeah, that is something that you can reach out and get, and we'll be happy to support you getting the information that you need to make a diet less overwhelming and more empowering.